everyone. Welcome back to Student Shoutout. And today, your host is me, Amanda. And today, we are with a spoken word poet, and I would like to call a friend of mine, Kimchi. So, Kimchi, you want to say hi and introduce yourself first?
Hi, my name is Kimchi 𝐏𝐸𝐬𝐿. I'm a spoken word poet based in KL, which are my initials actually, now that I'm realizing that. It's KL from KL. Hi.
Hi, so it's great to have you here. I have not spoken to you in like a while. Because
I mean, I think we just mainly see each other at gigs that happen around KL, and
yeah,
hasn't happened in a while. So
yeah, gigs have not been running in a while. So let's just get right into it. So first thing I want to ask is, since you're a spoken word poet, what got you started on poetry, and did you start with written poems before going to spoken word? What introduced you to it? Yeah, maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
okay. I wrote a poem out of my lecturer's name 4 years ago as a day. Yeah, I was in college. Up until then, I've always written, but mostly journal entries and just essays for assignments. Always consumed poetry, but never really got much into writing it. And then I wrote a poem based off a lecturer's name as a dare, and it did pretty well. My lecturer thought it was not bad, so I just kept going from there. Wrote a few more pieces, and then I spontaneously performed one of them at 𝐕𝐧𝐬𝐿𝐴, and then made friends from that and just kept going. But I'm really thankful to have gotten so lucky with my opportunity. So I definitely started out writing spoken pieces. That doesn't even make any sense, yeah? Writing spoken pieces. With spoken word poetry, definitely, pieces that were meant to be performed. Because the gap between when I started writing and when I started performing was so short. Yeah, I guess I just went straight into performance poetry, and my stuff used to be very rhyme and cadence heavy, very button poetry, like very, there's no other word for it, aggressive, I guess.
Yeah, the angry poetry, right? The angry poetry kind of thing.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, and I guess over the years there's no other word for it. I've just like gotten soft, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you said that you started doing poetry in uni. What were you studying?
I was in college, not uni.
College.
Yeah, the foundation, foundation. Yeah. And the dare of the lecturer's name was there was a public speaking class. In my foundation course. I wasn't taking it at the time, but my friend was, and one of the assignments was a poetry-based assignment. And they were asked to write poems based off their names. And I said, how hard can that be? And my lecturer went, oh wow, if you think that's so easy, why don't you write a poem out of my name? And I did, and it did pretty well. Yeah,
that's
so
super cool of your lecturer, though.
Huh?
That's pretty cool of your lecturer, to be honest.
Yeah, I to this day I've not heard of poetry as an assignment in a public speaking module in any other course that I've come across.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I would say this from my perspective. I think you're a pretty household name in the spoken word scene in KL.
Oh my god.
I would say I hear your name everywhere, just saying. And was it hard for you to just get to the point in the scene where people actually start to know your name?
Oh my god. First of all, that's a very overwhelming thing to hear.
I have your zine, okay? Like, I brought it to college, so.
Thank you. Very flattered to hear that. I'd say that I've definitely gotten very, very lucky with my opportunities. I'm very thankful for all the friends I got to make and all the people that I got to meet, and for all the opportunities that I've been given. I've definitely gotten very lucky because yeah, I performed once at If Walls Could Talk, and then someone invited me to open for Jacket, and then it just kept going from there. And I was very young when I started. I was 17 when I started. Now I'm 21, which is still, kind of young, but but it's still kind of young. But I would say that the scene was welcoming enough. They were very nice and very inviting, and always very, I was just this very excited kid with, a lot of things to say, and very overexcited to, claim my presence and make my voice heard. And they were accommodating enough, and did not and weren't too let's just say they were very nice to me, and made me feel welcome in the scene. And I found myself a community one way or another in the first few, pretty quickly enough within the first few months that I started performing, which I'm very grateful.
So you said that you started when you were pretty young, right? When you were 17, and I'm assuming if it's based off what I've seen, you're much younger than most of the people that are active. People who are hosting podcasts. I mean, I would know. I am also
not all, but when I first started, I was much younger.
Yeah, I think I started when I was pretty young too, but you know this. And meeting you and finding out how old you were, I was like, oh, I didn't know there were people like my age who were doing poetry besides me. And was there ever did it ever affect you in any way when you were in the scene and performing? Did you ever think oh, these people are older than me and they have more experience, and I'm not as good at them, as good as them?
Oh my god. First of all, there are so many people around our age that do poetry. The scene that I'm pretty sure you're referring to is a small circle of people that started out around the same age as us, or maybe a few years older, and then just kept going, and then had the passion and the resources to start doing events and making them more well known in KL. But people, teenagers, poetry is definitely getting more and more popular in Malaysia.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So there are definitely people our age that are, or people, teenagers, people younger than us that are writing poetry, and they just haven't been exposed to, let's say the scene that you're referring to before that. But you said that everyone in the scene was older than me. Yeah, that's true. But I wouldn't say it was difficult to fit in. I guess in my head, I was very desperate to want everyone to take me seriously. And it took me quite a while to realize that I didn't need to try that hard, because there's this quote that a poet in the scene always says, the point is not the point is poetry. And if you are friends with someone, or if someone hears your work and they like it just as it is, and they want to get to know you as a friend from that, there's already that basic respect. And so I guess eventually I stopped caring as much about what people thought, or what I thought people thought when they heard my poetry, or whether they associated my skill with my age or not.
Yeah, that's true. So since you've had decent amount of experience, and you learned your way through it, do you think you have found your voice as an artist? And do you think that's something that any artist can ever really achieve, where you find one specific voice for yourself? Or do you think it's it's something that you just keep discovering as you go along?
Making me sound a lot more confident than I actually am.
Well, on stage.
Okay. I guess I can talk about my writing style. Like I said just now, my writing style has drastically changed. At least within the first 2 years, I started writing. Like I said, first it was very snappy, a lot of wordplay, a lot of rhyming, a lot of cadence, very aggressive, very button poetry style. And I got soft, or a less nice word for that is lazy, or I just got tender, which is a nice word for gross, right? Yeah, my work's definitely softened at the edges since I first started. I used to care only about putting out or writing about stories that were important in the world, or stories that people wanted to hear, or stories that that were in public opinion had to be said. That in public opinion had to be shared or said. But now I just kind of do whatever feels good and right, I guess. And if I, at the end of the day, I've learned this. If I do feel strongly enough about something to write about it, whatever comes out is my story, told by my voice, regardless of its significance in the world.
Yeah, for sure. Do you feel like when you put out pieces, or when you read them, or publish them, do you feel like it's just like a cathartic kind of release, something for you to get out? Or do you sometimes feel like, oh, this is something that I feel like people need to hear?
Second one used to be what I operated on when I first started writing. Across the years, it's just, I wouldn't even say it's really the first one. Like, writing is definitely cathartic for me, but putting work out there is actually very nerve-wracking.
For sure.
Stuff that I published lately, actually, like let's say in the past year or so, just been stuff that there's just been stuff that I feel good about, that I feel not bad about, that I don't think is too heavy, or I don't think will weigh on my mind too much about what people are going to think if I put it out there, because it's my story, like I said. And the stuff that I've been putting out has been personal enough for people to relate, but not personal enough to reveal too much about my life, which is where I've been keeping the, I guess, disclosure level of the stuff that I put out these days. Yeah, my notes are a mess, but if you look at the poems I put out, they're pretty tame. I like to say.
Great poems, by the way. Just
thank you.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point on, like, sometimes you just write things or you create art and it's just like, hey, this feels good to me, I want to publish it, and it doesn't have to be this whole like, I want to make something like to make the world a better place. Like, sometimes creating art is just about creating art.
Yeah, and like I said, the pressure to create, to make a good story, to leave something that is, to put something out that leaves behind a significant mark. For me, at least, personally, it's just faded across the years, and especially, in current times with the current social climate going on. If I'm going to make art, I'm going to have fun doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect segue into the next question, which is in the pandemic and stuff, as we kind of get lost in like the day-to-day of like, hey, how many COVID cases are there today? When can I go get groceries? Is it safe to go out? And then there was the whole thing with the vaccines, whether it's safe, when can we get it? And since obviously most creating artists, especially poets, cannot survive on doing poetry because, it's like creating art is not, I guess, considered sustainable job-wise. Is there ever like a point where you just felt over the course of the pandemic, especially, where making poetry is just not a priority anymore, or just not something that you want to make time for?
Okay. First of all, I think there are much more qualified artists out there to be posed with this question compared to me. But I'll do my best to answer anyway. This is my story. Okay. I think there are both sides to the coin. I think there are two sides of the coin. it is a privilege to have making art solely as a source of entertainment, as much as it is to be able to make a living out of it if you do enjoy art. And yeah, like you said, my art at least is not my main source of income. But I do know how hard it is for full-time artists. And it's only gotten harder from the social climate as of late, right?
Sure.
But personally, writing actually got me through the first year of the pandemic, which was most of last year, most of 2020. I was going through some of my stuff of my own, as well as, on top of dealing with what seemed like the world being thrown into panic mode, but also put on pause at the same time. And every day, I think for a good couple of months, I just wrote or typed, whatever you want to call it, until I couldn't anymore. And this lasted like a good, I think, 4 or 5 months into the pandemic, until at some point I could barely look at my drafts, which is a very nice way of saying my notes app on my Google Drive, by the way. Stopped creating new stuff completely. Yeah, there was a point where I was just so completely drained, and I felt like there was nothing more in my head, or it was just all noise, and putting that into words took too much energy. And I turned to consuming instead. I just violently consumed stuff that lasted over, I guess, more than half a year. I read a lot. Yeah, I just started reading a lot of stuff. My friends' stuff, my local writers' friends' stuff, my overseas friends, writer friends' stuff, and then I only started writing new stuff. I personally only started writing new stuff again around March this year. And before the pandemic, a lot of my inspirations came from experiences, from being with or around other people in more ways than one. And being in isolation, being in quarantine, forced me to deal with the mortifying company of myself and myself only, because I'm an only child. I don't have any siblings.
Wow.
And I came to realize 2 things out of that. Number one, humanity is very interconnected, and we cannot survive on our own. And number 2, I am a far less interesting person than I thought myself to be when I'm on my own. Yeah, so based off of those 2 things, I developed a habit of a lot of violent, vicious, relentless consumption. So back to the question of whether I am making time for my art or not. I currently work for an overseas company. I got a new job a couple of months ago, so my working hours are flipped upside down. I usually, most people will be usually working at this time of the day, right? It's 1:48 p.m. right now.
Yeah.
But most of the time I end work at 5 a.m. So my downtime on weekdays is when the city is at its quietest. Wow. So I end work at 5, and when downtime for me, when the time that I'm supposed to be spending, maybe grabbing a drink with friends or outside, is when the city's just starting to wake up. It's at 6 a.m., 7 a.m., right? So there's no one to talk to, and honestly, I'm too exhausted for a conversation. Anyways, so I just read or watch stuff, and I guess what I'm trying to say after that long tangent spiel, whatever, is I don't know. My way of dealing with, I guess, being stuck or making art not feel like a priority is to consume other people's art when I don't have the inspiration or energy to make my own. So in conclusion, when you don't have the stuff or you don't have the drive to make art, support other artists, support local artists, and be kinder to yourself on days when you are not feeling so creative, if you are creative yourself.
Yeah, I think that's really solid advice, especially because a lot of students are going to be listening to this podcast. And I will say Nottingham as a campus has so many artists.
That is so much pressure!
No, it's not. It's not. Honestly, it is good advice, because I think speaking to my artist friends, whether they are musicians or writers, whether it's fiction or poetry, there's been this just obviously massive burnout across the board from like living in a moment that will literally be in the history books. And it's so stressful because there's so many things coming at you. You know, every day you open your news and you're like, oh, this politician's doing something again. You know, and sometimes, like, I guess art is just not something that almost doesn't feel sustainable sometimes when there's so many other things to worry about. But what you said is really true, that like turning to other people's work and just consuming art can sometimes remind you on why you are making art in the first place. At least to me.
Yeah, like I said, this is like that whole thing that I came to realize is, like I said, yeah, humanity is interconnected. We cannot survive on our own. Humankind was not made to live in isolation or cannot thrive in isolation, I guess. And when it comes down to it, I'm really not a very interesting person. A lot of my poetry derives inspiration from stuff that I experience with other people or around other people. So when I'm alone, I don't have much to write about, and I do, but the stuff that I do write about, I don't want to necessarily share with the world. I don't think it's interesting enough sometimes. I think it's too personal sometimes and stuff like that. So yeah, just read other people's stuff instead.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, okay, not to be like philosophical and everything, but like who we are as a person would not be the same if we never interacted with anyone else. You know, like who we become and like our personalities and everything is formed from like connections, right? From talking to people, from being with people. And personally, some of my best poems were written right after or during a spoken word open mic, just because seeing and hearing so many poems is like
that's very impressive. That is very impressive. Every time that it happens, the part of me that is present whenever I create just absolutely not exist. Yeah, it's just okay. I have this stuff, and here's what I'm going to do with it. There's not going to be any new stuff tonight. So that's very impressive. Yeah, wow, I didn't know that.
I mean, I don't know, maybe just for me personally, I need to consume art to make art. So if I go for like a long period of time without hearing any poetry at all, I cannot for the life of me write a poem. I'll have to like either go on YouTube and start watching or reading poems, or I'll go like when we could, I'd go to a physical open mic, and then like during the intermission, I'd just be like speed typing or like my notes out. Oh, that must require so much. Open mics for me are very like self-experience. There's a lot of voice going on everywhere, and a lot of my writing is done when in my own room, and it's very quiet. Or yeah, so wow, that's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that with me. No problem. I think it's cool to hear that two different people have like different ways of writing.
It's like people go on stage, let's say Jackie or if Ivor talk or whatever, and they're like, oh right, so I just finished this poem 2 minutes ago, and I'm like, wow, that is so impressive.
That's me.
That is so
yeah, I mean, whatever works for the poet, right? Some people will be like rereading the same pieces over and over again, and that's their way of like editing their pieces, reading it and figure it out. Some people they write alone and then they go on stage to read it, and then some people they write during the show, like me, and it's really cool to hear like there's so many different perspectives on how people write and how people create, but like at the end, like when you go to an event, right, it's just all of us together in one place.
Yeah. You miss those, right? You haven't been to one in ages. I think the last one I went to was in April this year. I think that was like after a long time. That was Jalan Dalam. At 𝐏𝐨𝐝𝐬𝐭𝐬 Art Gallery. I think that was first gig I'd been to in really, really long. It was quite nice.
I really miss going to gigs. I don't know. Hopefully soon there'll be another one. Now that things are kind of opening up.
You make lah.
I make
You don't. Not, I asked Nottingham to hold a poetry night lah.
I actually was thinking about it.
I'll take MC to go. I said it now. I said it on record.
You say okay. I'm gonna hold you to it. Okay. I mean,
I've been to
you've been here, right?
I've been to a poetry showcase that you guys had from your workshop 2 years ago.
2 years ago, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I hosted it.
Yeah.
She like teaching it, and then there was the show. There was the end of workshop showcase, and then I guest performed at that. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, we just saying that we are thinking of potentially hosting an open mic next semester. So if you would like to come, and anyone else listening to this, if you are thinking about doing an open mic, so poetry, music, anything, this could be your opportunity. So start thinking about it, because when the announcement comes out, that's when you can start setting up.
And I've had enough of virtual gigs. Let's come on.
No more virtual, real life. Okay.
A real time one. Okay.
Responsibly, with social distancing, with masks and everything. Okay, so I'm going on to my last prepared question for you, and I guess it's a very vague, open-ended one, but I think it's really an interesting question to hear, like I said, different perspectives. So, what does poetry mean to you?
Wow.
You can take a second to think about it.
Right now, or as of late, in the past, let's say, a couple of months until now, poetry is something that helps me believe that even when the world feels like it is crumbling, words can still be strung in a way that is still beautiful, that stories are still worth telling and listening to. Yep.
Wow, so poetic. I mean, so true. I really think that over the course of the pandemic, when everyone was just locked in by themselves, everyone has turned to art in some way, whether it's creating art to cope or consuming art. TV shows, movies, music, books, poetry.
I believe we're going to K-pop over the course of the pandemic.
Oh my god. Welcome to the club.
Yeah, and the 16-year-old cousin that got grounded at my house. Yeah, Marianne, if you're hearing this, shout out. She's not going to, but
she should. It's on Spotify. It's gonna be on Spotify. Okay. Over the pandemic and just in general, people turn to art to cope, and I really think that poetry is starting to become one of the slightly more well-known forms of art that people are starting to turn to.
Just maybe in KL. Maybe in KL.
Yeah, maybe in KL. I feel like compared to when I started doing poetry, like, oh god, how many years ago? How old am I? About 6 years ago.
Wow, she's a veteran.
No, don't say that.
Who am I?
Girl, no. Okay, I'm interviewing you. Okay.
In the presence of such greatness.
Enough. No, I mean, like, when I started doing poetry, that was like, poetry was like nobody around me thought poetry was like a cool thing to do. Everyone was like, oh, you write poems? But I don't understand like anything you're saying and things like that. And then now people are like, yo, poetry is like cool, which is, I don't know. It's a nice development. I like to think so.
Yeah. I don't know. I never had like that. I mostly kept my hobbies to myself.
Yeah.
But I did read a lot of poetry, and I was exposed to enough poetry. I feel like, at least on the internet, I kept I kept myself, so I wouldn't know if people around me thought it was interesting or not. But when I started performing, and when I wrote that piece in college, and I started writing more and more pieces, they were pretty well received and people, that was when I guess button poetry was pretty popular in the world.
Button
Not
poetry, like
just
phrase.
in the world. So I think it was I'd say we had different experiences lah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. People have always taken kindly to pretty words. It's just what kind of pretty words.
Yeah. I think it really depends on the group. I mean, I guess in college, maybe I've noticed that too, is that people are much more open to, hearing about different interests. But when I was in like high school, because high school, right? People are mean. It's teenagers just do not care.
High school. Oh my god, right, yeah. No, teenagers are... Yeah, I kept my interest to myself for a reason.
Yeah, like I did not like telling people that I did poetry. It was something that I was embarrassed about. And people only found out when like I would go to shows alone, and then they would see me post on my stories, But then it wasn't really something I'd like to talk about, because it was like, oh, this is embarrassing. But now, I don't know whether it's just being in college, or also that the shift, the outlook on poetry has changed a little bit. Maybe a little bit of both, but
it's mostly being in college.
Yeah, I guess college too. But it's like it's nice finding groups of people who can appreciate art, even if it's something that they personally do not do. Yeah, I think, I don't know, maybe it's just part of finding your gang, I guess. Okay, so I guess I'm gonna close off with a final question. Do you have, if you could give your just starting to do poetry self any advice or any words, what would you say?
Where do I start? Okay, let me think about that one. Oh my god. This would have been Kimchi in Kimchi Lai in 2017. People are going to take you seriously eventually. And when they do, it will be because of your work and not how you present yourself. And which you do a pretty good job of, by the way. You do a good enough job of presenting yourself as someone to be taken seriously. And eventually you start believing that people enjoy your work and people want to, speak to you and give you opportunities because they think your work is good, and not because you're this young, wide-eyed, bushy-tailed kid with a new voice that you are a force to be reckoned. Okay, right. We are never doing that again.
Well, I think that's words to live by, I guess. And I think that marks the end of...
Wait. One last thing to say to myself.
Okay,
no.
Cool. Sim cut the part.
Don't date a poet. Oh my god. Do not date a poet. This is not to my 17-year-old self, to anyone who's listening to this. If you are dating or crushing on a poet, tread carefully. Alright.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Great advice for the student population of Nottingham. And I think that marks the end of our podcast questions. Thank you so much for doing this, Kimchi.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This is very cool.
Yeah. Sorry. So before we end, I just want to say, is there anything you want to plug? Your social media handles, your zine if it's still on sale, any of your friends' stuff, any events?
Let me think about. There are no events. There are no events.
Right. Okay.
If there were events, you would know about them.
Yes, that's true.
You need to plug them. You would know about them. They already have been plugged before I entered this interview in this podcast episode. But I'm good.
You're good?
My name is Kimchi Lai. I am a performance poet based in KL. And if you find me on the internet, then you find me. If you don't, I'll see you in real life at the next performance. And support your local artists. Support artists around you.
Great. Okay. So right before we end this, I'm just gonna do some quick plugs for some of our upcoming events on campus. So first of all, the 𝐼𝐧𝐬𝐭𝐬 annual local play will be staged in February next year. So if you are interested in sign-ups for production, then that is open on the 𝐼𝐧𝐬𝐿 Instagram, 𝐼𝐧𝐬𝐿 UNMC. Yes, we're doing a face-to-face, real-life play, no Microsoft Teams. You get to sit in like a real room and watch people on stage in front of your real eyes.
Teams play. I want to see that.
Yeah, it's in February. So stay tuned to the 𝐼𝐧𝐬𝐿 social media, UNMC 𝐼𝐧𝐬𝐿. And if you're interested in production crew, you can also sign up through the 𝐼𝐧𝐬𝐿 Instagram page. And okay, pause here. That needs to be cut off.
Well,
try to think.
That's okay.
Do you have a question?
What play are you guys doing?
We're doing Swordfish and Concubine.
Ooh, okay. Yeah. Looking forward to that for you. I'm not sure if I would be able to attend, but I'm sure
it'll be next year, so we'll see. So, and also stay tuned to the Knots FM Spotify because there's going to be another episode of 𝐼𝐧𝐬𝐿 x 𝐷AG podcast with me as the person being interviewed this time, not the interviewer. And also, quick shout out to Digital Arts Guild.
I told you. That's right. You much more deserve to be interviewed than I do.
No, don't say that. Don't say that. Editor, please cut that part out. She's lying. Okay, shout out to Digital Arts Guild. Follow them on Instagram at 𝐷AG.UNMC. And also shout out to Head of Radio Tristan Veron at @TreeStanVeron.
Oh my god.
You can choose to cut the part out. Okay. And I think that's it. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Kimchi, for being here. And we'll see you in the next episode.